Shady side. So the setup of coffee and conversation, some of you have been to these before. Each one's a little bit different, but we have about half the time with content, and this is one that we have traditionally done together, because thinking about the future is not just college in a vacuum, but how do you think about the future holistically? What are the classes line up? What other things are going on? And how do you think about all the pieces that need to come together at the point that your kids apply to college? So Sophie's going to lead the beginning here, and we're going to talk really specifically about what are the course offerings, what are the choices your kids might have to make. Then we're going to segue into what does that mean for college? What do colleges look for, expect from our kids? We're going to talk a little bit about sort of summer and other things on the horizon for future. So the theme today is thinking about the future, courses, expectations, and beyond, and then there will be plenty of time for conversation. So even if your question has nothing to do with what we're presenting, it's just generally in the ballpark of making sure my child is prepared and ready for the next step, everything is open and fair game for that Q&A period.
All right. Okay, so since some of you have been through this process before, might be a little bit redundant to start, but what I wanted to just show you is this is the timeline. So we are just at the very beginning of it. So yesterday we had a faculty meeting where we've got all our course planning materials, and at DR today, so the advisory groups today, advisors will be talking with their advisees about this whole process. So this is sort of perfect timing, because this is probably when your kids will start to think really, if they haven't already, start to think more about next year and their planning for that. And then, so between now and spring break, both in DR and then in those individual cycle meetings, those are the conversations advisors will be having with their advisees. There's a range of choices, right? So if you have a rising sophomore, they don't have a ton of choice in their schedule. But we have a lot of rising juniors here and some rising seniors, or parents of them, and each year they get more choice. And so it's for some kids that's great, and for some kids that's kind of paralyzing, right? They feel like, oh my gosh, I have choice, and it was much easier when I just had to take certain things. So that's, as advisors, those are the kind of conversations that we start to have, is helping them sort through the choices that they have. The things that I focus on with my group, and I know most advisors do, we want them, well, first and foremost, we want them to take advantage of all the opportunities that it has to offer. So we want to help them build a schedule where they will, experience different things, take different classes. We don't want kids, especially, ninth grade, say, well, I only want to be an engineer, so I only want to focus on math and science. We really want them to expose themselves to a wide range of classes. We also talk a lot about balance. We want them to challenge themselves and to feel like, it's a little bit hard, right, and to grow that way. But we also want to be careful as we help them build their schedule to think about things like sleep, or if they have a job outside of school that they need to meet those obligations. If they play 3 sports, or if they play just one sport that has a lot of travel, those are all the kind of things that we like to talk about with them as we try to build a schedule that has balance in it. So those are the conversations that we will be having with kids in the next stretch up to spring break. And those are also really great conversations for you to be having with your children. And if they're not ready to do it right now, I know kids have a lot of work right now. They're sort of feeling, they've got a lot of assessments before break. But think about building some time in over spring break to have some of those conversations. The other thing that students will start to hear from their teachers, if they haven't, some teachers put their recommendations for next year in courses where there are levels, like language and math. Some of those recommendations were already in their comments, so you've already seen those. Some of those, they'll start to see this in the next couple of weeks. So I just would give this piece of advice from our office, and Claire is the one who handles a lot of these questions. We really advise you to follow the teacher's recommendations. So as far as course placement. We are not perfect though, and sometimes teachers make mistakes, or growth can happen between March and June. So these are, changes can be made, but our experience in our office is that if a student is really jumping levels against a teacher's recommendation, we usually see them like the 2nd or 3rd week of September, and they're panicked and get me out of here. And what happens with that is that affects their whole schedule, because we build the schedule based around course requests. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind as well, and that's something that advisors will talk about with their advisees, that we of course try to give kids the classes they want, But if they, and we'll build the schedule that way, it's much harder to change in September or even, you know, the first week of August, or sorry, last week of August, than it is, you know, as we're building the schedule. So students, you know, sometimes will say, well, I just want to try this class out, and if I can't do it, I'll just switch. And, you know, that could happen, but it also could mean switching their English class, switching their history class, you know, switching other things. So really be mindful of those recommendations, and if you have a question about that, if you feel like, wow, you know, I'm surprised my child was recommended for AB Calculus instead of BC, or level 3 of Spanish instead of 3A, now's the time to have those conversations. You know, have your child talk to their teacher. That would be my first suggestion. Have the child start that conversation. And if they don't feel like they got the answer that was helpful to them, you know, you might connect with the advisor and connect with the teacher as well. So, but do, you know, be mindful of those recommendations. I think that teachers put a lot of time into making them, and some of them might say even, we'll revisit this, you know, after the final exam. So, you know, that can happen. So at any rate, when we get back from break, our online course request system will open. This is, if you were here last year, very similar. Advisees will sit with their advisors and enter all those requests. And that they have about a week to do that. And then we will, Casey Suchuk, our registrar, will enter everything into the system. You will get an email saying this is what your child has registered for, has requested. If we don't hear back from you, we assume that you agree with us, or you agree with your child, I should say. But that's also a time when you might say, wait a minute, we didn't ever talk about them taking 3 art classes, or we didn't ever talk about X, Y, or Z. Let us know, and we can make the changes then. Again, it's much easier to make changes on the front end than on the back end. So some of the things that I think would be helpful for you as you get into the next couple of weeks of conversation with your kids, please look at our course catalog. It is online. We don't print them out because there's you know, tons of pages, but it has very basic information like our graduation requirements. These are things, again, as your child sits with their advisor, they will be checking in, especially for those rising juniors and seniors, to be sure. We really advise against kids getting to sort of spring semester of senior year and having to fill a graduation requirement, because, you know, any of you who've had a senior know, like, that's not always the most productive time for kids. And if they want to do a senior project, that can be a challenge. And we'll talk more about senior projects in a minute. But at any rate, we will be looking at this. So, and this is again all in the course catalog. But like making sure things like computer science and art, that those are all fulfilled as we look at the course planning. And one of the forms that we use, and this is sort of old-fashioned. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
So a credit is 1 term.
For most classes, for music, performing music, it is, the year is a 1.5. So it's a little bit different for those.
So like for math,
Yes.
for example, for a year-long class, that would be considered 3 credits.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to understand.
Yeah. Does anyone else have credit questions?
Can you go back for a minute
Yeah.
for that slide so we can look
Of
at that?
course,
Just
yeah.
so I can get a sense.
Yeah. And one of the things, science, we have 9 credits of laboratory science. So that's a change. It used to say 6 credits, but what we found is that almost every single one of our students was doing 9 credits. So that makes it a little bit easier for kids to navigate. They've changed around some of the prereqs so that those would include physics, chemistry, and biology. Typically kids do them in that order. Some of our 8th graders take physics in middle school, but that doesn't count as a credit for high school. Okay, so that it's 9 high school credits.
I'm just curious about how the transfer works. Like my son
Yes.
is a sophomore.
Yeah.
Where can I see what his credits counted towards?
Yes. Casey Suchuk would be the best person.
Okay.
I would just shoot her an email and say,
Okay.
you know, Jordan came in, and can you just be sure?
Just so that we make sure that
Yeah.
I'm sure that I looked at that with his college counselor too, but I
Yes.
just want to see where
Of
all
course.
that's at.
Yep.
Spell her
Last name is Suchuk, so it's SEWCHOK, and it's K is her first initial, so email's just K Suchuk.
So 2 quick questions about that. So health, the 2 credits, I'm assuming that sophomore year class
Yes.
fills that.
Yes.
Okay. And then arts, 3 credits. So if they did 2 years of band,
They're all
that
set.
would fulfill those.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, but visual arts, it's 1 term per credit. 1 credit per term, I should say.
But the performing arts is
Is
1.5 for
for
a
the
whole
year,
year.
yes.
Okay.
Other questions about credits?
My son did performing art last year in his old school, that means covered.
That's a good question for Casey Suchak. I mean, she, you know, I don't, I would just make sure you double check with her about that.
Or the advisor.
Or the advisor. Okay, and we can always come back to credits. This is a course planning worksheet that some advisors use with kids, just to, again, help them sort of, you know, sketch out where they're going. If you have, I know we have a couple rising 10th graders, so when advisors are meeting with 9th graders, even though they don't have a ton of choice for 10th grade, sometimes it's a good conversation to have, what are the things you dream of taking as a senior, right? So if you dream of taking, you know, physics 2 calculus, what do you need to do to be able to get to that point? Or if you dream of taking 2 English classes as a senior, what do you have to do so you can open up some room in your schedule to be able to get there? So, and these are not locked in stone, you know, this kind of planning, but those are good conversations to have. And again, with the idea that we want kids to take advantage of everything that we have to offer, right? So it can be a fun process for them kind of to dream about where they want to be as seniors, but there's also a practical edge to it as well. Okay, so I'm going to get back into the course catalog, and this is a lot of information, all of which is in the course catalog online. So we don't need to memorize any of these or take pictures of them. This just goes through each department. With athletics, this is something that parents sometimes ask about. Freshmen and sophomores need to take 2 team sports, participate in 2 team sports, okay? When students become juniors, they only need 1 team sport, but they do 2 other things after school, okay? So everything is labeled PE. That's something that happens after school, but that's not a team sport, okay? What we don't, you know, we don't want kids to not sign up for things and then, you know, think that they have a term off as juniors. That's not how it works. So that's, again, advisors will have those conversations with kids, but it does. And then as seniors, they just have 3 after-school commitments in athletics or science Olympiad or some of the other exemptions. But it changes each year. But as freshmen and sophomores, they have 2 team sports, and then the other term they can have off. Yeah.
So you're saying that you expect juniors and seniors to be doing something at school, after school, every term?
Every term, something like PE fitness doesn't meet every day. So they have different levels of commitment.
So what if you have a child who's got a very significant extracurricular? My daughter does robotics at CMU
Right.
in the winter term.
Right,
She's there till 8:30 at night, 4 nights a week.
right.
She has to have time to do homework.
I think that's an individual case, so let's have that conversation
Okay.
offline. But yeah, the requirement is 3 terms of commitment. So, but we can talk about that. Okay, each department has put together sort of a graphic organizer of their typical course sequences. So, you know, again, these are in the course catalog. Histories, I start with history alphabetically, but it's also pretty easy. They don't have a lot of choice. You know, freshmen typically take problems with history, sophomores typically take patterns, juniors typically take U.S. history, and then they have electives to choose from. And the electives in the history department are not all what you might think of as history. So economics is listed under history, just so you are aware of that. Philosophy is listed under history, so it's almost more like social science. But we have a 3-year history requirement. So some students might stop history with U.S. history. I will say that this came up actually in our faculty meeting yesterday. You know, could students take U.S. history as a senior and not take history as a junior? That technically is possible, but we don't recommend that unless there's extenuating circumstances. Sometimes students will, have a real reason to do that, but there's a couple of things with U.S. history. I think it's a really kind of a nice bonding experience for most of the 4 or 5 students there together. They're taking it and they write the U.S. paper in the spring, which some people who have juniors know that that's what they're very involved in right now. But we really want them to, ideally they'll do that during junior year. Okay, so if your child comes home and says, well, I'm going to take history as a senior, really ask a few questions about that, and that might be something you connect with the advisor about. partly, the U.S. history paper is a graduation requirement. And again, kids might lose a little focus as seniors, and we want to be sure that paper gets done. If they want to go on a senior project, they have to have that paper done before the senior project. So it's a little bit harder as seniors, although some kids will do that. But if they're following a sort of typical path, they'll do U.S. history as a junior, and then ideally choose from some of these electives. But this is something where if they want to take a double science as a senior, or if they want to double up in English, they might choose to do that. There also, as we get to senior year, there's more term classes. So there's a couple of year-long classes in history, like there's a year-long economics class and a year-long philosophy class. There are also term courses in those disciplines as well. So they might take a term of economics and then a term of inorganic chemistry. That may or may not work in their schedule, but that might be something that they request to do. Questions on history at all?
Sorry, I had a lot of questions. This is actually for you. For the colleges, when they're applying, do the universities want to see 4 years of history?
Not necessarily. I think it really depends on the kid.
Okay.
So anytime a kid comes to me and says, I don't think I'm going to take X next year, I say, what are you going to take instead? And that is the crux of it. So maybe, I don't think necessarily that they need to see 4 years of history, especially because many of the senior history classes, they're not history necessarily.
And I also, before I go to the next slide, I skipped English, actually. I didn't make a slide for it, because, English is, kids don't have, as freshmen and sophomores, they're all in the same class. And then for those of you who have rising juniors, the students will all take a class called Art of Persuasion in the fall. So that's their first term elective. But then they have choice for term 2 and term 3. This is another area where we really want the kids to dig into the course catalog and read through those course descriptions of English classes. There's about 10 per term, am I right, Ms. Logsdon? The students don't always read through them. I will tell you, we build the schedule based around their requests. And when they want to make a change, we rarely will change them to a lower level choice. Okay, so some kids, and I think this maybe happened this week, someone came in and said, well, I don't want to take this class. It was their first choice. And so that's hard for us to make that change because we look at balance between between classes and class size. So we really use their rankings that they turn in. Advisors will emphasize that with kids, but a lot of kids I think read like the first 2 choice descriptions, and then they just are like, I'll just randomly put in the other, number 8 through whatever 2 through 10, and we advise against that. And I will tell you, if you read the course descriptions, you will wish you were a student because they are all really interesting. So juniors have that choice for the first time. David Barndollar, who's the department chair, spoke with the sophomore class, so they know that that's coming. And then seniors choose all 3 terms of English. There are too many courses to list on the slide. Science, again, this is the typical sequence: physics, chemistry, biology, and then they can choose from electives, and there's many of them, including things like advanced biology or organic chemistry, a range of different physics classes. So many of our kids take 4 years of science, but again, they only have the 9 credit requirement there. I don't know if you want to speak to that, but all that along the same lines of the question of do colleges want 4 years of science? It's sort of the same.
Yeah, on the next slide I have like one caveat in there. I would say now, if you have a kid who's thinking, so any of this is fluid, in general we do encourage the kids to take 4 years of the 5 courses, the 5 core disciplines, but it might vary for different kids. The one caveat is if you have a kid who is thinking about engineering or doesn't even know what engineering is but likes the idea that they want to keep all their doors open for potentially engineering, we highly recommend physics too. So that would be our sort of one exception to what the colleges, the fluidity here, except we see year after year that students who are applying for engineering, sometimes computer science programs, that colleges are really looking for definitely physics 1, but often if especially if they don't have physics on their transcript in high school yet, that they have at least 1 year of physics, maybe 2, depending on their kid. Yeah.
If you had a student who was probably going into engineering and is on that normal sequence, senior year, would you recommend 2 sciences? And if you would, besides physics 2, what would the other one be?
I wouldn't necessarily recommend 2 sciences, but if I was going to choose 1 science, I would choose physics 2. If I had to choose a second one, I'd talk that through with the kid. What was the science class that you liked the most?
Okay.
You know, what, because okay, this is also this is also coming, but like colleges don't want specialists, they want generalists. They don't really want somebody who's already so formed and narrow into exactly what they want to do. They want to do that part. That's what they see as their job. They see as our job is sort of the broad education piece. So even the kid who at 9th grade is dead set on what it is they want to do, and the number of kids who come in and say, I'm going to drop this because I'm never going to use it again in my life. You might not ever use it. You know, I still personally wonder why I had to take so much calculus. I don't know. I don't use it. But I had to take it in college.
You never know, it could come out.
It could come up, right? I just entered my 40s, and who knows what this decade's gonna bring. Probably some calculus. But they really want generalists. And so, you know, the kid who loves science, just like, this is like, nothing makes me more excited than my science classes, sure. Then they should take 2 sciences senior year. But I don't think there's any college expectation that they take 2 sciences. For an engineering and super STEM-minded person, we would encourage physics 2 as the senior science.
The only reason I ask is my little daughter went to college this year, and she is pre-med. And there are some programs that were like those guaranteed med programs. She had not taken AP Chem, and so she could not apply. She was not eligible. That was a requirement. So that's why I'm asking. I don't want that to happen, that we're, you know, the school expects this, and she's not going to have that. That's what, you know. Now, I know we don't offer AP Chem. This was an traditional high
But we
school.
do offer 2
Right.
advanced years of chem. I'd be interested, we can talk after, because
Okay.
I've
That's the only reason.
seen that before.
It was both, it was both Case
As
and
a
Northwestern. you know, those
requirement
guaranteed
that they
med
have
programs.
the advanced chem and the advanced.
Well, I'm
business.
sorry, I guess it wasn't that the advanced chem, it was that they wanted them to take the
test,
subject test.
Yes.
SAT subject test.
Yes, and you really, to do well in that, you really needed that advanced chem class. So,
My son is taking chemistry in freshman, so what would be the science source?
Biology next year.
Oh,
Yeah.
biology.
And as a sophomore, and then as a junior, he'll be able to choose from the electives. Okay, so then he might choose to take advanced biology, or he might choose to take the physics 2 calculus that Lauren was talking about, organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry, and environment. I mean, there's a whole range of them, and that's, you know, what he probably will want to do is, as he gets to this point next year, as a junior, so he'll be in as a sophomore, he'll be in biology, talking with his science teacher, you know, say, well, I loved chemistry, what do you think I should try? Or I loved, you know, biology, should I just do advanced bio as a junior? So, yeah, that's where we're looking. Okay, this is math. Math is a lot. And this really is based on teacher recommendation. Okay, so we don't, you know, again, this is an area where we really do, the department works very hard on their recommendations. They will, again, as I said, like they might look at the final exam, so you might get sort of a tentative recommendation, but you know, we work pretty hard to get kids in the right spot with this. And then after, next slide, then there are all of these math electives, which Lauren wishes she had taken more of, clearly. But I mean, there's a lot here.
If only I could have had 3 more years
Yeah.
of calculus.
But they're rotating around, and again, I wish I could tell you more about what fractal geometry is. I go to those classes sometimes, and I sometimes don't even recognize the symbols that are on the board. But the kids love it. They get really into it. So I trust that good things are happening. So this is, you know, if you have questions about your child's math placement, it's a good time to reach out to their advisor and to their teacher. And sort of talk through that. But I would start with your child. I mean, they should have that conversation first, and then have the as the adults accept it.
I would also add that most of the term 2 comments from math addressed this, if you're at a decision point there. So another place to look back to would be, what did your math teacher comment say?
My son teacher says he should take next year discussion math. Like because he explains his math so good, he says that he should take discussion, and I don't see issues.
I disagree. I don't, yeah, I'm not positive what that would have referred to. But or maybe that's just the way he approaches, talking about what's happening in the class. But we can talk after, I'm not really sure. Yeah.
I see there's CHS statistics on there. Do most of the categories offer CHS things, and where do you stand on?
Yeah, just calculus and statistics. And the kids sort of opt in to those.
CHS.
Yeah, those are the only two where we go. And so, and in those classes, kids have the choice of taking it for credit or not. And a lot of the kids do take it for credit, and they'll take the exam that's written by Pip. So.
For those of you who don't know what that whole
Yeah,
conversation
thank
was,
you. Yeah.
CHS is college and high school, and it's a dual credit with the University of Pittsburgh. And they offer a lot of CHS classes, the University of Pittsburgh does, but our history teachers and English teachers and science teachers, they really want to set their own curriculum. Math is a little more straightforward curriculum, so the only ones that we offer are in the math department. And then again, that would be something your child would be recommended for in the comments, so go back and look at that and see if the teacher feels like that's a good option.
Okay. And then we have world language. And again, this is an area where teachers will recommend, and some of them had them in their comments. I'm not sure everybody did in their term 2 comments what they'd be recommended for. I will say that in languages where we don't have as many students enrolled, like German and some French, we might sometimes combine the sections. So it might be a French 4A class, and then the teacher will differentiate within that section. But your child will request the class that they were recommended for, and then we build it out from there. But it's fairly straightforward. Questions about language?
And is Latin still the only AP offering?
No, the kids take French. They can take French AP,
Okay.
Spanish AP.
Okay, so back to the languages. Okay.
Yeah, many of the languages. Actually, all. Yeah, not Latin. Yeah, it's Chinese,
Not
French.
Latin?
Yeah, not Latin.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Some kids will take the exam, so
Okay.
you might have that conversation. Yeah. Okay. All right, and then there's computer science, and this is an area where kids have 2 requirements. 2 terms of 2 credits, but we hope kids will take more and more of this as they get into the literature hub, and we have the new classrooms down there. Again, there's the problem solving is the prerequisite for all of the other classes, and some kids will finish with that second tier, but we would hope many would consider taking the 3rd level as well, and that might be something as a senior that they would choose to do, in lieu of history. I'm a history teacher, so I hate when kids do things in lieu of history, but they might say, I want to take AP Computer Science, instead of a history because I finished my requirements there.
Is that problem solving a sophomore?
It's the introductory class, so some take it as sophomore, some take it as freshmen. Yeah, I know. So cool, my bird taking it. And I think then we've got the visual arts here. And again, this is an area where there are 3 credit requirements. Many kids will choose to go beyond the requirements. I do want to just make sure our visual arts and performing arts, they're pass-fail classes, which we feel like gives the kids a little more opportunity to experiment and try out things. Kids who are sort of in the upper level classes can apply to take it graded if they would like to, but they can choose from these. I think we're at the end of the alphabet. Oh no, sorry, performance. And again, this is sort of the same, they based on what instrument they play or if they're vocalists or instrumentalists, they'll choose these classes. Okay, a couple things that are new and noteworthy we want to make sure we mention, and I realize I should have done these with the animation so I could have popped them in. But we do have some new courses being offered using all the tools and equipment that we have down in the Glimcher Tech and Design Hub. So kids have been told about these, but sometimes they forget. So again, these are classes I wish I could take. These are term courses. They are not, with the exception of the third one, the projects in tech and design, that can actually be used for an art credit. But the others are not for credit in a particular department. So they won't fulfill the computer science credit because they're not really computer science classes, although they're using a lot of those same skills. They're sort of science classes. They're almost like engineering in some ways as well. So these might be classes that if your child's thinking about being an engineer, they might try to take a building class where they can experiment with that. These are also going to be pass-fail, again, because they're very project-based and we want kids to feel like they can try things and it might not, they might not turn out exactly how they expected. But we're really excited about these offerings. Yeah?
So these would count for elective credits?
We don't have required elective credits, but they would count as overall credit. So they won't fulfill the computer science elective credit, but the 55 credits total, that would be included.
Yeah, that last one could be an art credit.
But that could be an art credit, that last one. Yeah, I mean, we were really hoping that space, and it already sort of has become that it's very interdisciplinary, so we hope that this kind of will push it in that direction. Yeah.
So if you look at the pass-fail in the kids' GPAs, how does that kind of affect if they have a bunch of art classes?
Right. Well, it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't affect your GPA. So their GPA is just based on their grades. So I mean, if they don't, if we only offer it pass-fail, and I don't want to speak for the college, but like the college wouldn't expect to see a grade for that. But it doesn't impact. Well, isn't it?
Yeah, but it does the kind of the type of class might affect their.
The type of class would, and I think again, if a student wants to pursue an art degree, I'm sure the college would expect them to see a lot of art classes, and if ours are pass-fail. That's their option, but they can apply to take them for a grade.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a conversation they have with their teacher when they start, and so that that might be something they want to do. The second thing up there is just the science research seminar. This is going to its third year. One of my favorite nights of the year is when I hear the kids present the research that they've done over the summer. I mean, this is a really cool opportunity. So kids do coursework during their junior year. It's not a regularly scheduled class. It doesn't meet as frequently as a regular class. But they work with one of the science teachers to develop their advanced research skills. So that includes reading papers that have been published. They really work on their Excel and developing that skill as well. And then we work to match them up with a lab so that they can do work over the summer in that lab. And then they present on that when they get back in the fall. So this has been, I think, a really great experience for the kids who've been involved. We have any boarding parents, but we did work to place some boarding students in labs, off-site as well, so which is great.
So if they wanted to do something like that, would that be a class that they would schedule, the science research?
The science research seminar is a class, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It typically is then like their sixth class,
Yeah.
like it's on top
Yeah.
of everything else they have. It doesn't typically replace their science class. I would just say anecdotally, I think sometimes kids sign up for this thinking it's kind of going to be they don't think it's a joke because they know that the research is serious, but I think our experience is that some kids have been surprised with the challenge of how much ambiguity there is. Some kids really love that. They're like given a big data set and they're like, you got, here are some tools and find the patterns and then get ready to present on that, much like science researchers do. But I think for the, Lucas and I were just talking about some of the kids who have come to us and been like, wait, do you know what they're asking me to do? Because it's really hard. I think they hear that it meets less often, and then they think that means it's easier. I think it's just a different way of thinking and teaching and learning, and the kids who are into it have loved it, and there's probably like one kid a year who either leaves or isn't into it, and I think it's mainly because they've got this idea in their head that it's not going to be hard because it meets less often. I don't know, Lucas, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think that's right on. I would think the only other thing is it's basically taught like a college level class. So it's very much like, hey, here's some stuff we're thinking about. You dive into it and then come back and tell me what you think.
But it is a really, really cool
Which is-
opportunity, and they love the lab experience in the summer, but it is a full year-long class. So if the only exciting part is the science research in the summer,
Right. Then
that's
it's not
a
the
real
right-
long year to get
Yeah.
through, to get to the summer.
How often do they meet for this science?
Every other,
It's about 4 out of 8. So the cycle, we have 8 cycle days, so they meet at 4 of those.
So would that be like instead of a free, like you fill in your free time with that?
Mhm.
Okay.
I don't think I have seen any student take it in place of a core class.
No, 'cause
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And when they finish it, you might publish it.
We just
You did?
learned that someone had their work from last summer published.
So the lab experience is in the summer.
Yes.
And the course is like a
Yes.
whole year.
Yes.
Yes.
So it will be junior, the summer for junior. Then.
It's the summer after junior year.
Wow.
It's a summer between junior and senior year, and it's a 200-hour, I think so. 100? It's
A lot.
substantial. They can do something else in the summer, but it's typically about 4 weeks of that research as a full-time commitment.
So they take the course during the whole year,
Yes.
junior year, then in the summer
Yes.
they do it.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes. And you have to apply for it, but the reason we're telling you is so that, you know, if you have a sophomore or a freshman, that you can talk with your kids about this, because this is one of those things that, you know, some kids just miss because it's not in the standard track, and because there's an extra step where they have to put forward an application and be selected to do it.
Do they still meet with the teachers over summer for this?
Great question.
One of the science faculty members will check on them in their lab, but they don't meet regularly. So
They come here.
they go, the student's just required to go to the lab, but the teacher will will check in throughout. Yeah, and then work with them a little bit right when we get back to school for their presentation. And then the other thing I put up here is just senior projects. So this is something we revamped the program last year, and so this year we have about 2/3 of the class participating. This is obviously something kids do in senior year. It's the last 3 weeks of senior year. So they drop their classes, academic classes, except for their APs. They have to finish out their AP classes. They have to, if they are on a varsity sports team, they are required to, you know, continue that commitment. They have to stay in music until their final performance. But these are really neat projects that kids have done. It allows them to explore something that's really important to them for 3 weeks, the last 3 weeks of senior year. Some kids will do community service. A lot of students will choose to shadow a professional, maybe a physician or a banker, if that's something they're interested in. Some kids will do art projects. We had a student write an opera last year, or finish an opera that he was writing. So lots of different things. So kids who are juniors this year, they will come to the presentation day for all the senior projects, so they'll get to see what the kids have done. But I just like to plug this whenever I can, because I think it's really a neat opportunity for kids. You know, seniors have lots going on, and it's a way for them to kind of just explore some things that ultimately might help them think about what they want to do in college and beyond. All right.
Okay. We've really already touched on a lot of these, but as Sophie said, we have spoken to the kids at each grade level meeting, and basically what we're emphasizing for them is you want to be in your 5 core academic classes for all 4 years. Where that does open up a little bit is in the senior year when some of those requirements are done. And as Sophie said, I'm a sophomore advisor this year, and I see in my sophomores, like, all those classes are year long, they have no choice, and around this time of year, they're just like, oh. I mean, even if they're liking some of their classes, it just starts to feel long, and I think if those of you who have sophomores, to make sure they know what's to come, I think it could maybe give them a little lift, because I think towards the end of sophomore year, they start to feel like, is this what it's gonna be like forever? And it's not. Because they do get a lot more choice and a lot more term classes that mix up the year in a different way. So in the senior year, when they have that choice, maybe they've finished a language, maybe they finished the history requirement, maybe they're not going to take 4 years of science, is really when we start to talk about what that senior year, what it would look like to double. Some kids do double in an area before the senior year too, and that might make sense for your kid. But in general, the rule of thumb is 4 years of the 5 classes, and what that looks like is pretty unique to each kid, but we already talked about kind of the physics thing. We talked about the next bullet point, and I would say, you know, in general, and for those of you who have gone on college visits, colleges typically say we want students to take the most challenging curriculum available that is appropriate to them. So that doesn't mean that it needs to be the most challenging classes available in the school, because sometimes that's not the right thing for your kid. But if your kid, for example, let's say they just finished 3A of a language and they had to work their butt off, but they got a B+. Sometimes those kids come in and say, I want to go from the A to the non-A, the A to the regular, standard to the standard, because I don't want to have to work really hard for a B+. And that's something we'd say, you should probably stay in the A, because a B+ is a very fine grade. That's what you've been recommended for. Now, if there's other stuff going on, if it's at the cost of all their other classes, if they're miserable, if they're crying, if they're not sleeping, yes, absolutely make that change. But the most rigorous available to them, that's appropriate for them. That's sort of the rule of thumb. So that's what you'll hear from the colleges. Now, some colleges you'll hear, we want to see your student is taking the most demanding classes that their school offers. Which again, that's kind of a nice catch-all thing to say, but I can tell you that at many schools, our kids get in year after year, and they're not in the most demanding classes that our school offers. They're in the best fit classes for them. Now, there are some schools out there, probably, that will look to see every single highest level class you could take at Shady Side, and did the kid do it, crush it, get an A. It's a very small number, and I wouldn't paint your entire high school career as a student or as a parent with those couple of schools in mind that are gonna be that way. I mean, it's really kind of thinking about holistically, who is your kid? How's this year been? I mean, that's where we start as advisors. That's where we start as college counselors to say, how did it feel to you this year? I mean, there are some kids, and it's hard for others to believe, but there are some kids who with 5 core academic classes in the most challenging things that they've been recommended for are actually not working that hard and doing really well. There are those kids. And then there are other kids for whom 5 academic classes and really just the other basic requirements, they are working their tails off and nothing else could come into that schedule for them that would keep them whole and healthy. And there's everything in between. But that's why it's really hard to make recommendations for everyone. But the starting point should be, really let's reflect on this year. Like, yes, there's always going to be some high moments and low moments, right? The night before there's 2 tests or the big thing is due, and that's what kids get really stuck on. But I think as the grown-ups in their lives, we can help them zoom out a little bit and say, yeah, that night was really rough, but like there were 4 other nights in that week that actually weren't. Or, you know, how did this year go, and how does that inform the choices that you're going to make next year? You know, and finally, we've really touched on this, but we can't emphasize this enough. Like, to be a strong college applicant, your kid needs to be healthy in all the ways. Because if they are not feeling good, and that's sort of broad, they can't be a strong college applicant. So whether that is about their sleep or nutrition or athletics or making sure that they have time to do the things that they love the most, I don't know, like, we have a senior this year who like loves training dogs, right? Like, loved his dog so much, got certified in training dogs, like that. He needs that in his life for him to feel kind of good and whole, and he probably won't have that in college, at least for a while. So, you know, making sure that when you think about your kid's trajectory, I think it's really sad when senior parents are like, yeah, they just don't have time now to do the things that they love. Well, that's not good. Like, they have to have the time to do the things that they love, because that is what actually, yes, colleges look for certain classes, but like holistically, they look for kids who have that like heart and soul and connection and spirit. And we don't want to see those things sucked out of them by doing the things they think they need to do to get in. And it's this really weird kind of ironic thing that happens, like, but I gotta do this for college and I gotta do this for college. And then they're like, they don't say it in these words, but some kids will basically say, I don't even know who I am anymore. I feel like a college application going robot. That's kind of what their words say, and that's like the furthest thing that we would want of them. So that's sort of the more, here's all your requirements, here's what we recommend, and make sure that you're thinking about this sort of on the more macro level, because your kids actually can't do that. Like their brains don't actually work in that way right now, because they're so in it that they can't, they need us to help them really zoom out in those ways. All right. And finally,
Summer.
I forgot one thing on the bullet of summer, and that was the college visit.
Oh, okay.
You want to see it here?
Yeah, sure. Looking up like that. So, who has been to this sort of presentation before? Has anyone been? Okay. So I have this joke. There's one thing you can't do over the summer as a student. What do you think that one thing is that you can't do? Nothing.
You can't answer.
You can't do nothing. Miss Lieberman hit the nail on the head. Passion projects. If you want to earn a buck and you want to work at a pizzeria and you want to scoop ice cream, do that. Those are important skills that students are going to learn. If they want to do a bike trip across America, if they want to volunteer, if they want to do a rocket camp, all of those things are correct. There is no right answer to this, all right? And especially if they explore different things all 4 years or do the same thing all 4 years is irrelevant, right? So if a student, I had a student last year who just loved going to summer camp. That's all they ever wanted to do. They looked forward to it, 8 weeks, and then they turned into a CIT and then a counselor by the end. Yes, that's correct. Then I had students who were like, oh, I did rocketry camp the first year and I hated it. So then I did an internship the second year and I hated it. And then the third year I did athletic camp and I hated it. But now I'm doing this one thing that I found that I love. Great, you just narrowed down things that you hate that you don't need to work on later, right? So all of those things are correct. I would think that by age, whatever is age appropriate is a good thing to think about also. So if a student is, what is the age in Pennsylvania for getting a job? It's like 15 or something. So if your student is 14 years old or 15 years old and isn't ready for that yet and wants to go to camp, that's good. I would say once you get into the sophomore, junior year, then it might become a little more focused maybe on college stuff, because that is free time that a lot of times they don't have throughout the year. So typically we see after 10th grade, students start to at least consider the testing, the SAT or the ACT, and that summer is a good break to even envision what that path might be like. They do not need to start their testing process at that point, but it is a chunk of free time in junior year, as we know, is a lot. And so students can at least start to get that process going. The same thing with between junior and senior year. That's a great time for college visits, right? That's a good time. I mean, students aren't on campus at that time, but we see our juniors right now, they are just like, they cannot wait for spring break. So they're like, oh my God, I got the college process started. Now spring break is coming up and I can actually go see the colleges on my list. Summertime is also an awesome time to do that. I would just say, and so the nothing part of it, I would say on a college application, the two things, there's really the polarization, right? So there's the nothing that might hurt you, but there's nothing that's gonna help you, right? So don't focus the student on like, oh, well, this thing is gonna look better than this other thing on your college application. I say, unless your student is splitting the atom that summer, there's nothing that is going to be better than something else, right? Ms. Lieberman? Oh, yeah.
Well, I just was gonna say, I think that last bullet point is also
Oh,
really
yes,
important.
yeah. Please, if you spend 2 weeks in New York with your family, still do that. Don't take that away. Again, we talk about the health and wellness of the student. This should not be all focused around a summer activity that a student needs to do to build a resume. The student is still a person. The student is not like just a robot. So if there is travel, they can please do those things, build those things in that will help the student be happy and whole, right? So, and again, the volume doesn't really matter either. If it's 4 weeks of your summer spent on vacation, that's fine, right? The other 4 weeks just should not be playing Call of Duty or football or something like that, Minecraft. All right?
All right, so we're definitely over the halfway of content, but we'll just open it up for questions, I think. And if you're not tuned in to all the ways that we share info, these are some of the ways that we share info, and we share a lot. We've got some videos online. Kelsey Williams is in the back, and she maintains our Instagram, which is really awesome. We have an active Facebook, and we post all sorts of stuff there. Questions? What's on your mind? Yeah, Julie.
So, is it at all normal that like a parent is totally not involved in class selection? Like I've never seen a spreadsheet, I've never, and Jack's doing just fine, like I'm sitting here like, wow, is it normal that a child would just choose their own stuff and they know what they want to do and that's okay?
Yeah, the
I mean,
advisor.
I'm glad I'm at the meeting, so I'm like,
Yeah.
It really
wow,
depends on
that's all, you know.
I think it totally depends on the child, you know, because there are some kids who got it, you know, and maybe they've talked to seniors, kids in the class ahead of them, but there are other students who are like, they're not going to think about it unless you ask them to think about it. So you know your kid, so I'm not totally surprised, but you know, I think he's done all the
On a spreadsheet I've never seen.
yeah,
So
yeah.
he's doing just fine.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So, but you know, if your child is someone who's going to put it off to the last minute and just ask them to start thinking about it, I think that's helpful.
Advisors are also heavily involved in this
Yeah.
process. So it's not like they're doing this all by
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, it's all worked out. It's
Yeah.
not like, it's not, of course, but yeah.
I think we see it as more of like a point of opening for discussion. Like I know this is going on at school, I know you've got it, but maybe sort of that zoom out macro or just like, wow, you're gonna be a senior next year. That's crazy. Like, aren't there like lots of choices or, you know, I don't know, kind of a discussion starting questions. But yeah, I think it depends on the kid.
Ray Gianna never shared any of this with me.
Okay.
That's where I gotta pay attention.
So I know this is a really hard question and you get it asked all the time and I don't know that there's a different spin on the answer, but the Shady Side level of difficulty in GPAs versus a GPA at a school not so rigorous and colleges looking at that. You know, I know there's some colleges that won't even look at you if you don't have a 3.5. But a 3.4 at Shady Side might be very appropriate.
Yeah.
Do you have another spin on that? Is
Yeah.
there another answer?
You actually did that very well.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is the most frequently asked question that we get. I mean, sometimes we joke that like we could present like your house is on fire, and it would be like, when do I take the SATs, and how will they know that Shady Side is hard? No, but it is a really valid question, and there are a couple ways to think about this. I mean, one of them is the information that we convey to colleges. So we tell them exactly what we offer. We tell them what the highest GPA in our class is and what the middle is, so that they're not assuming that anything other than this is the context of a Shady Side class. In addition to those numbers, they get a grade distribution by course. So for every course that a kid takes in the junior year, they get how many A+, A minus, B+, B, B minus. So they not only have sort of the overall number context, but then let's say, you know, your kid's overall GPA might reflect something a little bit lower because they have a nice upward trend, like that cumulative GPA is a third freshman year, a third sophomore year, a third junior year. Well, if your kid had a really rough freshman year, then their overall GPA is going to be a little bit lower, but then that's where sort of the grade distribution per class of the junior year will come in. And then there's sort of the whole like understanding of what it is that a school like Shady Side is doing and how that might fundamentally differ from some other places. There are some schools that frankly are probably not spending the time to really grasp the context of Shady Side Academy. There are a handful of those schools out there. And every year, you know, there is a long wrestling process that goes from January to August of our department with these guys and several others to say, are we doing everything we possibly can to position our students in the best possible way as they apply to the range of schools that our Shadyside students apply to. And we make changes every summer, you know, like what's gonna go on that profile, what's gonna come off. We're gonna engage our college colleagues. Every spring, we bring a small group of college colleagues to campus, and we spend time with them on, so for example, last year, we gave them recommendations, samples, ones we had written, ones other people had written, and said, what is really standing out to you? Which ones do you like the best? Which ones are the easiest for you to work with? And we took that and we changed up the way we wrote our recommendations based on that feedback. So we'll do that again this spring, and we're cooking up what that's gonna look like to make sure we get their input and are constantly keeping up. So, I mean, I wish I could say like every single school that our kids apply to, know Shadyside, value Shadyside, give them a bump for rigor, and everything works out for every kid. That's not what I can say, but I can say we know that overall we get data every year on exactly like what the national admit rate was, where Shadyside has done significantly better than the national admit rate. We go through every school that our kids apply to, we look at that, we identify, oh my gosh, there are 4 schools that Shadyside didn't do better than the national average. What happened there? We're gonna go in, we're gonna contact those schools, we're gonna make them go through. We might show up at those schools and say, talk to us. So I think overall, like, our kids are doing really well, and I think some of that is because, you know, both they understand the context of a school like this, they have the history in a lot of cases, and we're always looking for ways on the margins where there are those 5 schools where our kids are not doing better. Why? You know, and sometimes it's out of our control. Sometimes it's out of our control. We talked with a school yesterday, a very popular school that our kids apply to. They shared with us that they admitted 60% of their class in early decision. They had 3,000 applications in early decision. They had 27,000 applications in regular decision. That means they're taking 40% of their class with 90% of their applicants. They had 27,000 applications in regular decision. I don't know that the context really matters.
Yeah.
They had great applicants from Shadyside. They had great applicants from a lot of other places. We did get the feeling that they understood the context here, and also, that's really, really tough. That's really tough, and those odds are slim for those kids. So that is the reality.
I did want to mention also, we had 135 schools visit us last year. And that, I mean, has been for foreseeable past and foreseeable future, we will have that. When they come in, we sit down with them for 20 minutes and say, this is what we're about. Let me take you to the tech and design room. Let me show you around. Let me introduce you to a student really quick. So not only are we sort of sending out material and documents and having these phone calls, but they come to us. They get to see the beauty that is here and interact with the best of the best. So I think that's really important.
When you are, your kid is not sure about where he wants to go, like what field he wants to choose, what's the best question to ask him? Mm-hmm. And also, which college you go to visit?
Yeah.
Well,
I would start with saying, you know, that is most kids. Most kids have no clue what they want to study. I mean, think about your kids. Like, they can barely think about the next day and like, what do they need to put in their bag? What's going to happen after school? To think about like what you would do for college and the rest of your life, that's really hard. Most kids don't know. Most kids apply to college undecided. Most kids apply to college into an arts and sciences program undecided with maybe this or maybe that because I've read about it or heard about it and now those things sound interesting. And that is how the American higher education system is built, and that is the distinguishing factor why so many students from abroad have come to the US, because it's not a tracked system, that this is one of the only places that kids can go to college and continue to broadly explore. That said, we certainly do everything we can from our end to expose kids to what is out there. So whether that's hearing alumni panels and alumni coming back saying, I studied this in college and then I went on to do this, and helping them think about what that path might look like for them. We've offered a couple different series. We call them the Discover series. So we've had Discover Business, Discover Engineering, and for engineering we had a panel of 5 different admissions officers from 5 very different schools talking about what engineering looks like in college, what it looks like on their campus. We did a business one. We did Discover Study in the United Kingdom. What would that look like? So I think encouraging your kid to take advantage of the offerings that we're putting before them, and also, you know, other things that they might want to explore. Do you want me to contribute?
As a parent that's done 20 some odd college tours, because those are times that you spend with your kid, and they start to reflect on things. When they start to see things, they see other kids, they see the programs that are offered, they get a feel or a vibe for it. And those times that you're driving between colleges is when you really get a chance to talk and to learn from them. Yeah, because there's kind of, I remember when my oldest, we were traveling, you know, up in upstate New York, and we were talking about where he might go to school, where he might end up. He kind of started crossing off some of the things there because he really wanted to end up in Pittsburgh. So like you use that time to kind of explore and to kind of learn there, and go to a bunch of colleges because there's different flavors, you have big and small, and kids will start to kind of feel that.
You go for summer after sophomore or in junior school? You start visiting school. When do you see?
Yeah, any time is appropriate, because I think the idea is you want to find even little things that you like or little things that you don't, and the deal breakers and the must-haves, and just start easy. Go to Penn. This is way too urban or way too big, or this is the perfect size. This has so much school spirit. Great, okay, then go to Chatham. Chatham has 900 students, right, to 18,000. That's a pretty good difference maker. You're looking at 2 very different schools right there, and you didn't have to leave. Well, I might put my phone out here. They're both in Oakland. No, one's in Oakland and one's in Squirrel Hill. Shady side.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to. Thank you. But you don't have to go 2 neighborhoods over to get 2 schools. Very, very different ones. So start there. Start easy, and then as you sort of extrapolate out, you say, okay, that was too small. That was too big. This was too urban. This is what I'm looking for. This is Goldilocks, right? This is the school that has all the just right things.
And like anywhere you go, like, you know, my kids travel for sports all the time. We just see what schools are close by.
Yeah,
Just go on campus, go eat a meal. Like that's always a big thing. Eat a meal on campus. Like see what the vibe feels like. Even if it's not a school that they're like, oh, I think I want to go here. It's just so that you can get an idea of different campuses and how it feels in different states, in different places, and it just starts to give them an idea of how to narrow down what they're thinking about.
So one thing we did, because I have 2 kids who are in college, the beginning of junior year, like I could tell based on how my daughter did on PSATs where she might fit naturally. So we did in the fall, we went to Eastern Pennsylvania, and we looked at some small schools like Haverford and Swarthmore, but we also looked at Princeton and Penn. I wanted her to have, because she was in that category. I wouldn't send her to, you know, but I gave her a feel. I wanted to see what small, urban, suburban, mid-sized schools were. And she also had a sense of that she wanted international relations. So we went to visit those schools, and after that visit, she said to us, I want mid-size, I want city. Like that was enough to give her, and then so over spring break, we were more focused on city schools, mid-size. It helped us. So I was shocked because I really thought she'd want that small liberal arts. Did not happen that way at all. So that was a great way to give us a little bit of direction. And we did the same thing with my next daughter. So it was really, it helped.
I would also just say, like, and if your kid's not there mentally, just make it fun and really low stakes. I mean, this is a bad example because my kids are in elementary school and I'm a college counselor, but like everywhere we go, I mean, honestly, and like the signs on the road, hey, there's Teal College. Like, some people have never heard of Teal, but look, it's on that sign. I wonder what that is. I wonder who goes there. Let's look it up. Hey Siri, what's Teal College? Like, it doesn't have to be like, here we go, this is the first one, let's try to narrow it down. What'd you like, what'd you like, what'd you like? you know, it can be very much like, we're driving, or we're here, or we've got this family thing, and like, I heard there's a great deli in that town, let's do that. I had a family recently tell me they plan a food tour everywhere they go. I'm like, oh, please take me on your college trips. But it also, you know, the things that your kid loves, if it's like the sport and it's going to the like football Hall of Fame, or you know, when you have, and it still takes time and it still takes money, and you know, those things are not always easy to come by, and they're often hard to marry at the same time. But it also just like be mindful of like planning some fun stuff in there too, and kind of keeping the stakes really, really, really low.
I had a question about when the colleges come to visit. Do you have sessions with the students in these colleges?
Yeah.
And so because my daughter hasn't said anything, I'm assuming that's not until they're juniors.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
So it's really built in for the seniors,
Oh, okay.
and seniors can come in at any time. They can miss class if they feel it's appropriate.
Okay.
Juniors have to have it free. So if Harvard is coming first period and you have a class and you're a junior, you can't miss. What we do say is if you want to come and just introduce yourself before class, you're more than welcome to do that if you're a junior. But it's really there for the seniors to take advantage of the events.
We do have some upcoming events. We have a college fair here in April, and that is open. It's really open to all Shady Side students. It's really geared towards sophomores and juniors early on in the exploration process. So that is a great, that's on April 18th, and that is a great, very, again, kind of low stakes, good chance to start talking to admissions reps and getting a feel for some different schools out there. I think we hear every year, like, I met the rep my sophomore year, and then it just kind of stayed on my radar randomly because I happened to stop at that table. So that's another opportunity that is geared towards sophomores and
We
juniors.
hear all the time right now, we'll suggest a school to a student, and a student will go, oh my God, I met the rep at the fair, they were so nice, yes, I definitely want to apply there. So I think that the fair is a really great tool to use if the student is starting to think about the process.
We're basically at time. We'll maybe take one more question.
What?
Okay, we'll do both of your two questions, then you're done.
When do our students get assigned a college counselor?
Christmas junior year.
At their
And just quickly, to narrow down, not necessarily the school, but maybe a discipline, you know, general business versus engineering versus social. Is there any testing that you do or could recommend, personality type testing that you pick out what interests are there for? I mean, when you have no idea, is there anything that you would recommend to go that a certain direction?
I have something, it is not readily available, it's expensive, it's a lot, so my quick answer is no.
Okay.
But there is something called Johnson O'Connor, which they are not located in Pittsburgh, the closest one is in Washington DC. It's 8 hours and 26 tests, and they're just aptitude tests. So it's like, pick up this nail with a pair of tweezers and move over here, see your fine motor skills. It's like brain testing like that. They say you're going to be really good at 3 of them, you're going to be really bad at 3 of them, and in the middle of the other 20 or so. And then from the things that you're great at and the things that you're bad at, they say these are the careers that you should look at, these are the ones you shouldn't. I basically got into college counseling partially because I took the test. So I can't recommend it highly enough. However, it's anecdotal. It's purely, I have no statistics to back that up.
We do in our college seminar, so we offer a college seminar in the middle of the junior year. And in one of those sessions, we do they're like online free assessments. And the kids love it. I mean, you know, it's like taking a quiz in a magazine, you know, like when you were younger and you'd circle up those things. And they do like it, and they do get a lot out of it. You know, I always think of the story that Amy Nixon told me, which was that, and Amy Nixon is the head of our middle school, and she told me this story that after she had taken time off from having her kids, and she had worked in schools for a while, and then she took some time off, and she said, well, maybe I won't go back to schools. You know, like what should I do? I'm going to take one of these tests, and it told her that she should become a farmer, and she was like, I think I'm going to go back to schools. And that was the end, and she's been in school since. So I I do think there's some stuff out there that is really good. Every summer when we go to conferences and stuff, we're always looking for like the best in class tool for that, and I don't know that that necessarily exists, and I think part of it is because they're teenagers and their minds change a lot, and their brains are still developing, and but we do some of that in our junior seminar.
We really try. I would say that it can really become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If a kid sits there and is like, I want to do finance, and then just clicks through everything that leads them to finance. So.
Any final closing thoughts?
We maintain a teacher page for every grade, so like your kids have a teacher page for English, math, and they also have a college counseling for 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th, and there are some of these websites that they're referencing that are free that are on there, so they can look around and take the 16 personalities. Or,
Well, thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.